I've done a few seam samples on these demos, but today I thought I'd do a hem sample. And sewing with silk can be very tricky, but there are lots of techniques that can really help you. So I'm going to show you my two favourite ways of hemming silk today. So I use this when you've got things like, if you're making nice sort of silk camisole tops or those floaty dresses, or even if you're making underwear and things like that, being able to do a narrow hem is really worth knowing. And I actually use this technique when I'm working with chiffon, when I'm doing the hems on shirts sometime as well. So the first thing I do is turn my fabric up 1 centimetre along the bottom. So the first thing I do when I'm doing the hem is press it up 1 centimetre and then stitch really close to that edge. There, so just a couple of millimetres from the edge. And the way to do that, I'll show you in a second, but the way I do that is to use my ditch foot. Actually, I'll grab my ditch foot here. It's one of my favourite feet, the ditch foot. It's got a guide in the middle here, which is right in front of the needle. So you can use this for top stitching and for stitching in the ditch. Turn up 1 centimetre and stitch really close to the edge, and I use my ditch foot, so I place the guide of the ditch foot along the edge of the fabric and I move the needle over to about 1, and then all I've got to do is run the guide along the edge of the fabric, and I know that I'm going to be stitching about a couple of millimetres from the edge. So that's a really useful use of a ditch foot. I always say that if you want to stitch a straight line, don't look at the needle, so any guides that you can use really help with that. So once you've done that lot of stitching, you then need to trim as close as you can to that stitching, and I'm going to use my applique scissors for this. You can use normal embroidery scissors, but I like these duckbill ones because you can lift up the top fabric and then cut really close to your stitching. And the closer that you cut to this stitching, the smaller your hem will be. So I'm going to go as close as I can, but the duckbill scissors do prevent you from cutting the fabric underneath. I'm just going to go all the way along here. So I thought I got a small piece of fabric, but it's still taking me a little while. So I don't know if you can see, but I've trimmed really close there to that seam. Now I'm going to go to the machine and put the foot on the machine. So there is. Now you could press this over or you could pin it, but I tend to just do it by just turning it. I might regret this now.
Do you want the pins?
I might just put a pin in to start actually.
Yeah, silk pins.
So I've got my silk pins. Normally with a lawn and things like that, I can just do it. And I'm just turning it over the width of where I trimmed it. So you should be able to do it with your fingers and just do it straight to the machine. But because it's quite springy, this silk satin, like I said, I like to give myself a challenge. I'm just going to pin these over. You could give it a little press, but I don't like to do a hard press on silk. It's nice to have it nice and soft. So, right, let's just see if I can do this now. Okay, so I've still got my ditch foot on the machine. Because of the camera, I'm going to have to start a little bit further forward, I think. That's my issue. There we go. There we go. There we go. So I folded the fabric over and I'm just going to run the fold. Just move the needle over to 1 and just stitch along. So this is a nice machine because it always stops with the needle down. So I can keep a bit of tension on this side here and just run the guide along the edge of the fabric. And obviously you'd be using matching thread. Nails and hair, isn't it? There we go. So on the wrong side you have 2 rows of stitching, but on the right side you've only got 1. And that's a really nice little narrow hem. I use that a lot and it makes it really easy. If you're doing this on something like chiffon, you could use spray starch, which would just stop it being quite so floaty. So that's my first favourite way. So the second way I wanted to show you is a hand rolled hem. It is nice if you have time to do a hand rolled hem, but obviously it does take a bit longer. So with a hand rolled hem, the first thing you would do is press over. Now really I would press over about 1/8 of an inch here. Well, I've made it a little bit bigger so that you can see. I've done it probably about 1/4, but ideally you want to press over about 1/8 of an inch for this part, and give it a little press there, and then grab yourself a needle and thread, and you need a fine needle and a thread that you have pressed, waxed and pressed. So for those of you that haven't heard me talk about this before, you thread your needle, then run your thread through some beeswax, place it between a piece of kitchen roll and press it, and that takes off the excess wax. And by doing that, it just takes out any little twists and curls in your thread, makes it a bit stronger. So hand rolled hem, so just press over, get your thread ready, tie a knot in one end, and then I'm going to go underneath the fold here and come up right on the fold, so the knot will be buried underneath the hem there. And then I'm going to come back down, and I'm going to grab a small piece of fabric, just a couple of threads, and then go up at a slight angle and take a bit of fabric from the hem. Generally my stitches are about 1/4 of an inch apart, and you want to do about 4 or 5 stitches, so you're getting a little V on the back here. So you take a couple of stitches from the fabric just next to the raw edge, and then this is quite nice to do actually. It's a little bit addictive. You know, I love hand sewing, so I get a little bit addicted to it. And then up at a slight angle. And I'm just going to do one more, so you can see that it's getting a little V there. I'm going to do one more stitch. Okay, so once you've done 4 or 5 stitches, all you do is pull your thread, and it will bring the rolled edge down. There we go. And it just folds it over. So you continue all the way along, doing your little V's all the way along until you've done your rolled hem. And like I say, I normally do my stitches about 1/4 of an inch apart, and you could do them smaller if you wanted to. I'll just do a couple more so you can see a bit more of the hem. So just pull the thread, and there you go, it turns the edge over. So it is really nice. You don't want to pull it too tight. Obviously you'd be using matching thread, so you would. I've got little dimples on the back here. I'll just turn that over, sorry. You can see a little line of white threads there, but you'd be using matching thread. When you get to the end, secure your thread off, and then you don't want to hard press this. You just go over it with steam and maybe just press it with your fingers. And it's a really nice way to do a hem. So I could sit here all day doing this. That'd be a bit boring for you though, wouldn't it? So there you go. More hand stitches for you to do, and you can go off and hand stitch all your hems.